Ladies and gentlemen, the next session for our online audience, I'm looking at you right now. This is the time in which you start session 2. The title of this session will be Restructure, Pursuing Green Growth. Now, this session is presented to you by Angers. We are pleased to have a distinguished lineup of keynote speakers in this session, ladies and gentlemen. At this time, I would like to invite His Excellency Dato Sri Satya Dr. Awang Haji Matsuni bin Haji Muhammad Hussein. He's coming through with a pre-recorded message to us. He is, of course, Minister of Energy, Brunei Darussalam. This is his keynote address.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Excellencies, esteemed panelists, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon and warm greetings from Brunei Darussalam. Before I begin, I would like to express my sincerest appreciation to His Excellency, Mr. Gan Kim Yong, Minister for Trade and Industry of Singapore, for the invitation to deliver a keynote address during this prestigious event. I would also like to congratulate His Excellency, as well as the Ministry of Trade and Industry and the Energy Market Authority for the excellent hosting of the 14th Singapore International Energy Week 2021. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with the growing climate change concerns, the notion of green growth as a path of economic growth that is low carbon and environmentally sustainable is gaining momentum. The main driver for green growth is the transition towards sustainable energy systems. Indeed, the theme of our discussion on pursuing green growth is very relevant because we need to foster economic growth and development while sustaining resources and minimizing impact to the environment. For Brunei Darussalam, our 2035 vision of high quality of life with sustainable environment, highly skilled people, and a diversified, sustainable economy requires adaptation of the green growth to sustainably manage our natural resources efficiently with lower negative environmental impacts. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to spur green growth, technology plays a critical role. If we take the energy sector as an example, continuous technological advancements has led to a more competitive renewable energy landscape. Across other sectors, such as transportation, technology is key in promoting electrification of the transport system and the increased use of hydrogen fuel cells. These overall contribute towards a higher energy-efficient economy, leading to lower greenhouse gas emission. Through Brunei Darussalam's chairmanship of the ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting this year, we are organizing a seminar on the role of natural gas in advancing a low-carbon energy transition for ASEAN member states to collaborate on issues related to natural gas. Similarly, an workshop on the hydrogen economy and CCUS will be conducted. These platforms are aimed towards promoting the exchange of knowledge and best practices so as to advance green technologies. That said, we believe natural gas, including LNG, continues to play an important role in the energy transition. As a clean fuel that is affordable, reliable, and flexible, natural gas will continue to be our preferred transition fuel to meet the needs of the growing energy demand. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, but technology alone is not sufficient. To further accelerate the green economy, the right economic policies need to be in place to create a variety of conditions at the individual and policy levels to change behaviors towards environmentally friendly consumption and production patterns. Government support through regulations and incentives are a few measures that can be taken to initiate the promotion of the green economy. In this connection, I am pleased to share a couple of key initiatives undertaken this year in Brunei Darussalam. First is the rollout of the Energy Efficiency Standards and Labeling Order, which aims to promote efficient energy consumption and inculcate consciousness among consumers. Second is the introduction of zero routine flaring and as low as reasonably possible policy in the oil and gas industry as part of the industrial emissions strategy commitment. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to further sustain green growth, a conducive ecosystem needs to be created. Collaboration between the public and private sector also needs to be enhanced, as public sector financing alone will not be sufficient to drive green investments and projects. For Brunei Darussalam, we are enhancing private sector participation through public-private partnership in the financing and undertaking of renewable energy development projects in the country. This initiative aims to accelerate our progress towards a greener energy landscape so as to reach at least a 30% share of renewable energy in the power generation mix by 2035. With the increased level of participation from the private sector through PPP, employment opportunities will therefore be created in the green economy, such as renewable energy, green agriculture, and sustainable forestry. In closing, I'm confident we can accelerate efforts towards green growth to ensure a more sustainable economy while still maintaining energy security for our people. I look forward to the fruitful exchanges and discussions at this summit and wish all of you a most successful event. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much. Now, delivering his keynote address next, ladies and gentlemen, is His Excellency Alfonso G. Cusi, Secretary of Energy, Republic of the Philippines.
His Excellency Yang Vernon Pahat, Dato Seri Setya, Dr. Awang Haji Matsuni bin Haji bin Hussein, Minister of Energy of Brunei Darussalam, Excellencies and esteemed speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our warmest greetings from Manila. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to the Energy Market Authority of Singapore for giving me the chance to briefly share some of my insights on how we could rise above current challenges to restructure and pursue green growth. COVID-19 has pushed energy transition to the fore of the global energy agenda after revealing the vulnerability of conventional energy systems. Collectively, we recognize the urgency in securing a reliable, resilient, and sustainable energy future. We can no longer afford to be concerned about merely meeting our immediate energy requirements. We must ensure that the coming generations would be capable of fulfilling theirs as well. I believe in 3 Gs that would guide us in realizing our energy goals and successfully completing the energy transition. The first G stands for gauge. Policymaking, as we all know, is dynamic and never static. It's our primary objective to determine whether the policies we have in place continue to be effective, appropriate, and timely. We must gauge, restructure, and adapt. For us in the Philippine Department of Energy, we consistently assess and recalibrate our policies and programs to make it not only responsive, but proactive to the needs of our people. Given recent domestic and international developments, we updated our Philippine Energy Plan for the period 2020 to 2040. This plan is our blueprint to advance the goal of empowering our consumers and building a sustainable energy future. In our vision, there will be shift in our power generation and energy mixes from being oil and coal-centered to one that is fueled by clean energy resources and technologies. By 2040, we envision renewable energy to be 50% share in our power generation mix. By then, energy efficiency and conservation will also have been transformed into a national way of life for the Filipinos, allowing us to make wise energy decisions and emulate judicious energy utilization habits. Now we have our second G, which is grow. All these efforts are being pursued so we could rebuild, and not just in the new, but in a better normal. Even before COVID-19, we were already trying to ramp up our capacities to meet our ever-increasing demand. And now we are trying to restart our respective economies. We must continue to expand our energy resources and supply levels so that we may move forward. And since globalization is no longer a theoretical concept but a reality, we stand to gain so much more as one prosperous global community. This leads us to our third and final G, gather. The pandemic might have temporarily forced us to take refuge in our personal spaces, but our recovery efforts cannot be hinged on isolationist policies. Navigating the energy landscape in a sustainable manner is a concerted effort requiring the full and active participation of all our stakeholders. It also calls for bilateral and multilateral alignment between and among countries and regions. Fortunately, the Singapore International Energy Week continues to provide us one such platform where we are able to engage in constructive discourse on pressing energy matters. Year after year, we gain invaluable knowledge from the experts and our counterparts, which goes a long way in enriching our strategies towards inclusive development. Gauge, grow, gather. All three G's in the better normal. Thank you very much, and we look forward to listening to this afternoon's speakers and panel discussion. Mabuhay!
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Our next keynote address, ladies and gentlemen, is delivered by the Regional Vice President, East Asia and Pacific, the World Bank Group, East Asia and Pacific, of course, to deliver this next session, is Ms. Manuela V. Farrell.
Ministers Yong, Lang, Chief Executive Chun, distinguished guests, it is a pleasure to offer remarks on the occasion of Singapore's International Energy Week. We are meeting today to discuss energy needs just as the COVID-19 pandemic still affects both the developed and developing world, and as economies are gradually starting to reopen. There's a global economic recovery underway, but the pace of recovery is uncertain. In April this year, we projected that the developing East Asia and Pacific region, excluding China, would grow by 4.4% this year, and we now expect growth to be only around 2.5%. This is partly due to the evolution of the pandemic, but also due to shortages of key inputs and energy price increases. We also see that recovery is uneven across the world. Per capita incomes may increase by nearly 5% in developed economies, but only 0.5% in low-income economies. There are two key implications of this context on energy markets. The first is that reliable and affordable energy supply is going to be key to a strong economic and social recovery. And developing countries, including many in this region, face growing energy demand. Second, while countries adjust to short-term economic impacts that are driving up energy prices right now, they continue to face the longer-term collective action imperative of reducing the carbon footprint of their energy consumption. In about 1 week, many world leaders will be discussing climate change at the COP26 in Glasgow in the UK. The World Bank Group is the largest provider of climate finance to developing countries, much of it embedded in cleaner forms of energy and transport, more resilient infrastructure, climate-smart agriculture in cities, and we are aligning all bank finance projects with the objectives of the Paris Agreement by middle 2023 and working with governments on their plans to green entire economies. Our country climate and development reports, which analyze ways to advance development goals, but to do so in a manner consistent with countries' climate commitments, will identify practical ways to do so, including by meeting each country's energy needs. We believe that growing energy needs need to be met using gradually cleaner sources of energy. In this context, the transition away from reliance on coal for electricity production to cleaner energy sources will be a critical component of climate action by both developing and developed countries. Coal is responsible for 1/3 of greenhouse gas emissions, and presently accounts for 40% of power generated globally and 60% of electricity consumed in the East Asian Pacific region. Reducing the world's reliance on coal will require an unprecedented increase in investments in clean energy, as well as the grid infrastructure to integrate these new sources to ensure reliable supply for economic activity and for households. At the global level, this will require a 4 to 5-fold increase from current levels of new renewable solar and wind capacity additions every year for the next few decades. We estimate that meeting the NDC targets or commitments of China, Indonesia, Philippines, and Vietnam will require investments of $8 trillion for the power sector alone between 2020 and 2040. A more aggressive scenario, aligned with the Paris Agreement, could increase the required investments to $10 trillion. Encouraging this transition through relative price and regulatory reforms will be needed so that economies can both grow and develop, but also avoid building stranded assets and contribute to further global warming. It will also entail some costs which many developing countries may be unable to afford. These costs would have been borne by consumers, taxpayers, and international assistance must also contribute. So identifying the price, fiscal policy, regulatory changes needed, and mobilizing the trillions of dollars of financing required to ensure that energy transition takes place, but also that energy services remain affordable to developing countries, is the critical task ahead. Our conversations with the private sector indicate that they expect significant complementary public sector policy action and a predictable regulatory environment to de-risk and bring in this increased private capital. Concessional financing will also be required to bridge the viability gap. So this is a critical conversation that we are having today at a very critical time. I hope that this Singapore Energy Week will be an opportunity for a productive exchange to support the clean energy transition, and we at the World Bank look forward to continuing our very strong partnership with you. Thank you.
And thank you, Ms. Farrow, for your delivery as well. Our next session, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be a special interview, and this would be, of course, we're going to be having our panelists, one on site and the other one joining us virtually. We have Mr. Francesco La Camera. He's the Director General, International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. Joining him on stage for the interview, as I mentioned who he is making his way up, is Mr. Luca Tonello, Managing Director, Structured Finance Department, Asia Pacific, SMBC. Do enjoy this session, ladies and gentlemen. Luca, I'm going to leave you to connect up with La Camera online. Thank you.
Very good. Good afternoon and good morning for those who joined from overseas. Very honored to be here and to have the privilege of interviewing Francesco. If hopefully he doesn't mind me to call him Francesco. In Italy, I would call him Dottor La Camera. So one question, given his very privileged position and how he sees the renewable energy really industry globally. So what can IRENA do in terms of concrete steps and trends that you see in the market to help ASEAN achieve their goal, sustainable goals?
So thank you, Luca. Grazie, Luca. And I wish also to thank all the Singaporean authorities for having me in this occasion. So concerning your question, we are assisting to a few major trends that are in place. First of all, the decreasing of cost of renewables. We have seen now in the last 8 years, the renewables has been outpacing with the installed capacity, the fossil fuel one. Just last year, to mention, we had in the year of the pandemic, 260 gigawatts has been added in as a capacity. And this has been the 4-5, the fossil fuel one was just 20%. So 80% new renewable capacity added, only 20% the fossil fuel one. And this is because of the rapid decrease of cost of renewables. That has been now solar, wind, they are hydro, naturally they are in the range of cost of the fossil fuel. In many parts of the world, they are more competitive. So this is the most important trend, decreasing cost of renewables, and at the same time, more and more new renewable installed capacity. The other trend that has also been in some way provoked in the view of the COP26 are all these commitments coming from many countries now, from Japan to China, to US, to South Africa, to the Asian country. So many countries are committed for being net zero in 2050 or in 2060. So this is another relevant trend. And if you want also to talk about prices, we see that also the price of electrolyzer, so for producing clean hydrogen by renewables, the cost of storage is also decreasing sharply. So these are the major trends that we are assisting to. And ARENA naturally is working in this respect globally. As you probably know, Luca, we have published our World Energy Transition Outlook in June, where we say where we have to go to fulfill the commitment of the Paris Agreement, so the 1.5 trajectory. And we are working now to renew our renewable outlook for Southeast Asia, to make clear what is needed in terms of investment, in terms of policies, in terms of benefits for going to the energy transition in the area. So as a first step, what we are providing for the region, it will be a comprehensive outlook on what should the region do for being in line with the 1.5 degrees pathway.
Thank you, Francesco. Certainly, in reading your report, which I read with a lot of interest, also the positive impact the industry had on employment, especially post-COVID, that's something that is very important, especially also in this region, which maybe is going to lead me to my last question. But before we get to that, in terms of, from your point of view, and again, a very privileged position to be able to see what's happening around the world, what do you think have been the most effective policies or regulation or action that have successfully moved best practices and capital to accelerate the transition, because that's what we would also like to see in order to achieve our goals?
Look, this is a very complex question, many aspects, but I would like to cover all. First of all, I think that we have to be clear on one fact. So not one opinion, but one fact. Our energy system is moving to a system that will be dominated by renewables and complemented by green hydrogen and sustainable biomass. This will happen. This process is unstoppable. The question is not the direction of travel, as possibly the English will say, so direction of travel, but the question is the speed and the scale of the change. So what is important is that we put policy in place that may accelerate this process that is already there. And this will bring from one first priority, because until we have in the grid 35, 40, 45% of renewables, this has been demonstrated during the pandemic. It does not cause major problem to the grid. But if we want to go beyond this share, we have to work on the grids. So the flexibility, interconnectivity. So these are the way that the public money should be spent to favor in investment. So if the infrastructure will allow for more investment in renewable, the money will come. Also, there will be fiscal policies. So the carbon pricing, the raising of the subsidies to the fossil fuel. These are also policies that are relevant in this respect. How to build a system where green hydrogen can play a role. So we have to work for to subsidize in some way in the first moment the electrolyzer factory. So these are all elements that may increase our capacity to let the private money, as has been said by the previous speaker, into our system. But I want to also say one last thing, if I may, in 1 minute, is all this will happen only if the transition that we have to accelerate will be just and inclusive. So the moving to a cleaner energy system will be not only an environmental or economic goal, but should be also a social goal. So it will be important that the benefits of going to a green economy will go to everyone. And this respect is important, especially in that region, that an industrial sector that may feed as a supply chain, the new energy system will be put in place. So industrial policies are very important, and social policies, because there will be people that will losing job, but the people that will get new job. And we have to work to make this transition very smoothly. Our last report, just published, make clear how the renewable jobs are growing also in this very difficult time, from 11.5 million to 12 million the last year. And they will grow to 43 millions in 2050 if we put the right policy in place.
And thank you, Francisco. Actually, on the point of maybe you touch on the innovation, that's also what makes this transformation very impactful, because it does create also a lot of jobs and opportunity. It's no longer the energy industry we used to know when maybe we started, but it's a lot of technology and new ideas, which makes it also exciting and also to a certain extent attract a lot of young talent into this. Very briefly, last question from us here in Singapore. It's around really, incorporating sustainability and green objective, and of course, socially responsible investment into ASEAN policies. What is, especially in the context of recovering from COVID, what's your take on this and your advice to the audience here?
Yeah, first of all, we have already started to work with the ASEAN country and all other countries in the world. We have working together with more than 70 countries in the context of the climate promise of the UNDP on the NDCs. So the NDCs may be a way to put in the commitment to fulfill the Paris Agreement commitments to planning. So building the planning that may the energy transition be part of this move to sustainability. So I think this is a very, very important thing. And then, as I said at the beginning, this new energy transition outlook will be also a way to set very clearly not only the move for be consistent with the goal of the Paris Agreement, but also to put the sustainable goal in front of us as a work for their achievement. And remember that possibly the most important sustainable goal that we risk not to get to be there is the SDG 7. So one on access to energy. We have still 800 million about people that are without the basic services, 2 billion without clean cooking. So where energy can make the difference is absolutely at the service of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you, Francesco. And I really appreciate your views. I think we were honored and delighted to have you here. We all thank you for being with us. And I'll close the session. And thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Luca. Thank you very much.
Thank you, La Camera. And I think Luca deserves a round of applause. He handled this all by himself on stage, ladies and gentlemen. There you go. Thank you, Luca. Much appreciated. Right, as you can see a little bit of movement at the back of me as I get ready for this next session, ladies and gentlemen, just to get everyone in good order for this next panel discussion as we refresh the stage. Now, we certainly hope you've been enjoying yourself thus far, and I'm going to be mentioning that we are now going to have the first panel discussion again for the subject of Restructure, Pursuing Green Growth, and this is the panel discussion. I'm going to be mentioning who they are before we invite them up on stage. We have a whole long list, so I'll mention their names one at a time. We have Professor Kang Seng Jin, Chairman, Electricity Regulatory Commission, Mr. Eric Pang, he's joining us virtually, Director, Electrical and Mechanical Services Department, Hong Kong, SAR, China. Ms. Audra Low, Chief Executive Officer, Clifford Capital. Mr. Thomas Botlow, CEO, Energy Solutions APAC and Country Head Southeast Asia, Angers, Southeast Asia. I think we're all ready, so let's have them come up. As I mentioned, the remaining panelists, ladies and gentlemen. We also have Mr. Kazuhisa Yano, Executive Chairman, Chief Asia Representative, Osaka Gas. And of course, ladies and gentlemen, we have a lovely lady moderating this session, and she is Ms. Gauri Singh, Deputy Director General, International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. Now, Ms. Gauri Singh, I invite you to enjoy this session, ma'am, and of course, for the rest of you, enjoy this panel discussion.
So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be at the Singapore International Energy Week. And it's actually great to be in a panel where we can have people in person. Of course, we do have Mr. Pang, who's joining us virtually. So I think, this has been such a great session in the morning where we heard about the very strong ambitions that were clearly articulated by the ministers of energy from Singapore, from Indonesia, and we also heard from Philippines and from Brunei. And just keeping with that pace, because our analysis at IRENA shows that 90% of the solutions in 2050 will have renewables in direct supply, electrification, the green hydrogen, bioenergy with CCS, and energy efficiency. So they are really going to be the key solutions that we are looking at. And interestingly, these are all here. So it's not as if you're waiting for something to happen at a later stage. So we already have these technological solutions with us. But then transitions, as we all know, is not just technology, but also it has a very human face. It has, we have to be looking at what it does for growth. And we estimate that it'll add about 1.2% to the global GDP and also create many green jobs, which is what I think is a very strong driving factor as well. So while we do think we'll need a huge amount of investments, we've estimated almost 131 trillion US dollars going into investments in energy technology, energy transition, and a large part will come from the private sector. But very critical is also the role of the public sector, because that will act like catalyzing this this growth and crowding in of the private sector funding and money. So that really brings me to actually ask Professor Kang, who is a regulator in Korea. And my question to you is that you're an economist, and you really know how the market plays out. So how do you see this whole area of the green economy shaping up, and what's your thinking about how it's going to drive jobs and get the market forces really going?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to introduce the experience of Korean policy. Last year, Korean government announced Green New Deal in order to recover green recovery from the pandemic. And the government proposed the three pillars: green transition of infrastructure, low carbon and decentralized energy promotion, and innovation in green industry. And under these three directions, 8 concrete projects were proposed. Let me introduce some examples. First of all, green remodeling. The green remodeling is the renovation of existing buildings toward more energy efficient one. We, the government, envisage to save energy and at the same time to create the jobs by opportunities to the people and to the industries. Secondly, as we have very much discussed, the promotion of renewable energy. Government actively set a very active target of increasing renewable energy. Up to 2025, the capacity will be tripled. So from 12 gigawatt to 42 gigawatt in 2007. Recently, the government reinforced more actively set the higher level of renewable target in order to meet the NDC, Paris Agreement goal of 40% reduction of emission and net zero toward 2050. And in doing so, we can expect creation of several jobs. Of course, the most of the material that come from abroad, we import, but in constructing and in managing, in operating the renewable facilities, we expect we can create the jobs. And lastly, the government wanted to promote R&D and promote green industries and renovating existing industrial complexes toward more greener one. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor, because I think that's a really holistic policy that you've put together, because you also have very high ambitions.
Yeah.
So I'm sure with this kind of a very comprehensive structure, we'll be watching how Korea moves towards meeting its ambition.
But this is the government policy. I hope all these projects will go well. Will go well.
Absolutely. So. Mr. Yano, who's from Osaka Gas, and I know that you're also now moving very rapidly towards creating an ambitious pathway for the company for renewables. So how as a private sector player, how do you really see that, see the role that a private sector entity should play in this, in accelerating the energy transition?
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I'd like to thank the EMA for holding this annual conference despite this difficult situation. I'm very happy to come back to Singapore after 1 year time. I'd like to urge from the viewpoint of the private gas utility, and my opinion is based on the premise that Asian region will be seeking for two goals. First, decarbonization. Second, economic growth at the same time. So how can we accelerate the energy transition? One of the key factors is technical development. There are a lot of options which are sufficient for one goal, but it is very difficult to achieve both goals. One of the most promising is methanation technology. Methanation is a process to produce synthetic methane from hydrogen and carbon dioxide. This synthetic methane can minimize the social cost for building a carbon-neutral society because it can be used in the existing infrastructure. We are seeking for carbon-neutral gas by using captured carbon as its feedstock. Methanation can be a solution to securing stable and reliable energy supply, which cannot be achieved by renewables such as solar and wind power fully. Methanation can contribute to providing stable energy as a carbon-neutral gas for power generation, just like LNG. Another area where methanation can provide a solution is the high temperature heat demand, which is indispensable for the industrial sector, industrial activities. synthetic methane can be used as a carbon neutral gas to meet their heat demand, as well as carbon neutral solution to their fuel conversion from coal and oil. The Digas group, which I belong, has been developing this methanation technology in order to contribute to achieving our carbon neutral society. We are developing original methanation technology with business partners. For the success of this project, the most required element is government support to secure low-cost renewable energy for processing and a lot of carbon dioxide that are necessary to produce synthetic methane. The areas where government support is desired include subsidies for technology development, financing for the project launch, and more importantly, establishing international rules for emission and offset counting, a kind of carbon credit. The Degas group is striving to reduce CO2 emissions by promoting fuel conversion from coal and oil to natural gas as transition energy. We established our trading arm in Singapore, Osaka Gas Energy Supply and Trading, OJES for short, and working to expand the LNG trading in Asia at the moment. We have been also participating in the Keppel Data Center project for its energy procurement, including clean hydrogen that will be introduced by 2030. In conclusion, in order to contribute to sustainable energy transition, the Degas Group is developing technologies for carbon neutral energy while reducing as much carbon emission as possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think that was a very comprehensive answer, because you've also laid out what you would want as a private sector entity from the government and from policymakers as you move forward on this. But let me now turn to Audra, because as a financer in our panel, you've heard that this region, not just this region, but globally, what you're looking at is not just decarbonization, but also economic growth. So I'd invite you to share your perspective on how the financing sector can actually accelerate this green growth that we are looking for, the green jobs that we want.
Okay. Well, hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here. I'm probably biased, but I think that finance sector actually has a significant role in driving green growth. And we do this by influencing behavior, and we can also drive investments towards the right green projects. We already have seen this happen before, and that's in relation to coal-fired power plants. Actually, quite a number of years ago, it started with the European banks first starting to pull away from financing the coal-fired power plants. And gradually, international banks started to follow suit. By now, practically every international bank has policies in place specifically that exclude the financing of coal-fired power plants. And you can see that this has actually had a noticeable impact in slowing down the development of new coal-fired generation capacities, even here in Asia. But in the case of coal, actually that alone wasn't enough to halt the addition of new coal-fired generation capacity. And the reason is because there are still a lot of state-sponsored financial institutions that was responsible for financing these kinds of projects. According to The Economist, I think it was something like 95% of the financing for coal actually comes from state-sponsored financial institutions, particularly from Korea, Japan, and from China. And I think the good news is that just in this year alone, all three countries have actually pledged that they would stop supporting coal-fired power plants overseas. And I think with this kind of announcement and this kind of pledges, we actually now may have the possibility of seeing eventually a halt to the development of new coal-fired generation. And of course, it will still take time before coal is retired altogether, but I think this is a very important milestone, and part of it has been driven just by financing. So as we move beyond coal into the future, I think finance could potentially have an even greater influence in terms of green development. That there is actually a lot of eagerness amongst banks, among investors and other financiers in financing renewable energy, for example. And this eagerness and this strong demand has actually translated into a much lower cost of capital for these projects. And that's really important because you talk about advancing technologies resulting in a lower cost of production, leading to lower tariffs. But actually, the cost of finance is not insignificant. And it also has a role in delivering energy to consumers in a much more cost-competitive manner. I think many of you would have heard of terms like greenium. Greenium essentially is the premium that investors are willing to pay for green bonds versus regular bonds. If you say it another way, effectively what it means is that lenders are prepared to offer discounts to borrowers who are borrowing and applying the proceeds to green projects. Banks are also these days structuring things like sustainability-linked loans. And effectively what this is the borrowers are required to sign up to a handful of sustainability-linked targets. And if they fail to meet those targets, then obviously there'll be some penalties attached to it. Again, it's just to drive and incentivize the right behavior, directing investment into more sustainable approaches. If we talk about new technologies, I think this is probably where it gets a little bit trickier. In general, I would say equity, right, has always been, they have always had a key role in investing in innovation. But debt providers historically are not great with new technologies. They want to make sure that they tend to finance projects that are proven. And we, as a commercial lender, we also have a very similar concern. But of course, for us at Clifford Capital, we also have a policy mandate. We're here to support Singapore-based companies investing or exporting to overseas markets. So I think for us, we want to try to see if we can try to move the needle a little bit. If we do come across new technology, we try to approach it by thinking about how we can structure it to address the specific concerns of lenders everywhere. We have actually done this recently. We financed actually a floating LNG project here that's being built here in Singapore. And that ended up being the first entirely commercially financed FLNG project. And what's also interesting about this project is that it entailed the conversion of an old LNG carrier into a floating LNG production facility. And because of the conversion, you end up saving something like 33% worth of greenhouse gas emissions. So we thought that was also very much a step in the right direction. So I think as we progress and as we look into so many of these new technologies that we talked about since morning, whether it's hydrogen or ammonia or methanol, or whether it's electric vehicles or plain old renewables, I think there's many exciting opportunities ahead. There's plenty of capital. You just have to get the financing structure right, and the capital is available to you.
I think that's a great ending note from you, because as the green financing matures and the whole range of technologies that are available now that can be financed, it's really good to know that there's this shift that's happening in the financial sector. And you're very right. It's a lot about how you want to incentivize the right behavior and the right shift. And I completely agree that finance plays a very, very major role in making that shift to happen. So let me turn to Mr. Pang, who's joined us virtually. But it's great that you could join us in this panel. And Hong Kong has very recently issued their Climate Action Plan 2050, which is all about zero carbon emissions, livable city, and sustainable development. So if I could really invite you to tell us a little bit more about, because Hong Kong does have buildings which are the major consumers of electricity. So how is this new vision going to really translate into very tangible actions, and what are you thinking in terms of how this will accelerate the green growth and the green economy there?
Yes, thank you very much. I think this is a good question. Yeah, well, in fact, first, may I congratulate the SIEW for holding this very successful event. Well, in Hong Kong, we have a policy that has been announced last year to strive for carbon neutrality by 2050. So in the early October, we issued the Climate Action Plan 2050, as you have already mentioned. It is a very comprehensive plan that tackles two main aspects. The first one is about how to achieve it technically. That involves the load side, the generation side, the power generation, how we ensure carbon neutrality from the generation side. And the second thing is about the load side, how we save the energy, reduce the amount of electricity and other form of energy use, so that we can still be competitive, even though the low side, I mean the electricity generation may become more expensive in the futures. And the second main aspect is about the economic aspects. We think that, well, with the decarbonization plan, there is a lot of opportunity, both in the technical side, in the engineering side, and also in the financial side, because Hong Kong is a financial center. So we think that we can leverage the strength of Hong Kong to finance these green developments and the decarbonization. So let me focus first talking about the buildings. We played the two roles. The EMSD played the two roles in energy saving in building. First, we are the regulators, and the second is that we are promoter. As a regulators, we emphasize that we will enforce a number of new or enhanced ordinance in order to regulate energy efficiency. The first one we mentioned about is the Building Energy Efficiency Ordinance that requires new buildings or buildings after renovations to be energy efficient. We have requirements for the developers to follow during the new developments and the renovation works. Actually, in the past year, we started this law in 2012. And up to now, we have progressively tightened the requirement so that we can achieve 18% reduction in energy consumption for new developments. We emphasize that by 2050, we can achieve much more. Say by, well, it should not be a problem for us to achieve about 30 to 40% reduction in carbon in energy use for buildings. The second one is about the use of energy in residential buildings. We have plans in hand to mandate the energy efficiency labelings for existing products and also for new products, and to expand its coverage to cover more of these products, be gas or electricity, and so that they will use less energy in the futures. We will also progressively tighten the minimum requirement so that even if you wish to achieve the level 1 standard that is the best in Hong Kong, it will be more and more difficult to achieve. That would promote the trades to adopt more new technology. And the second thing I'd like to mention is that we need to encourage innovation and technology. That is very important, because without innovation and technology, we can still achieve incremental reductions in our energy consumption. But if we need to have a step decrease by a significant amount, we need to use innovation and technology. So, well, our department is doing a lot to promote the innovation and technology to enhance the collaborations between the public sector, the private sectors, the researchers, the industrialists, etc. So that we can have more I&T in place, and that is available for use by the public. And the third thing I think is equally important. It's about the public education and the cultural change. That is because even if you have a lot of law, and if the people does not buy in, and they won't give up their lifestyle, or they won't change the lifestyle. So we think that public education is very important. So in implementing our plans, we have included education bill as well to ensure that that is properly addressed too. And for the investment side, the government has decided to invest about $30 billion of money in the coming 15 to 20 years to accelerate the decarbonization in Hong Kong. And we will also issue green bonds, and our plan is to issue about $22 billion of green bonds in the coming 5 years. So that is a very ambitious plan, and we hope that we can strive and achieve the carbon neutrality in 2050.
Thank you so much. And, I couldn't agree more with both the supply side management giving more green electrons to demand side management and the behavioral change that you're bringing in from educating the consumers, and also the emphasis on investment and innovation. So it's definitely bringing all the stakeholders together that will lead to to these very reaching these very ambitious targets that you have in mind. And from innovation, it gives me a perfect segue to Thomas, who's been leading in getting very innovative business models and giving a very strong value proposition to corporates and cities who want to move on this path of sustainable transformation. So, we'd really like to know what really drives the cities and corporates to go along this path, and is there something that governments could help support them or give them a nudge in that direction?
Well, thank you first. I'm very happy to be here. The matching of the demand and the supply is really music to my ears. It's what we've been advocating for the past few years. And it's interesting to see that as we exit a very serious crisis, we're still experiencing an era of business where focus is still put on sustainability. That's very reassuring. That was not the case in the past. And so what we are really about at ENGIE is to help our corporates, our cities, clients achieve two very simple things. It's consume greener energy and consume less energy. That's very simple. And obviously, in the implementation, there's a level of complexity that's involved. But we're helped in the region by the fact that our sustainable products are becoming more and more economically relevant. It's never been cheaper to move to solar energy. It's never been cheaper to move to energy efficient solutions. And it's only going to go in one direction in the future. Solar is getting cheaper and cheaper as we move along. There is a little hiccup today on the market because we're exiting COVID. There is a supply chain challenge, but there is no doubt that we are on a downward curve. And that's really helping move the needle. So at corporate level, we're helping our clients build on-site solar capacity. Whenever they have rooftop available, we can use of that space to help them reduce their utility bill. We can build large-scale off-site capacity and give also to corporates that are interested to contract directly the energy through contractual innovation. We can get those corporate access to the green electron directly. And there is a wide range of energy efficient solutions that come as well to the market to maturity that makes sense economically, that makes sense from an environmental perspective. And if I take the extreme example, what we can achieve at the city level, I'm a very big promoter of district cooling. With such solution, you can cool an entire network, a neighborhood, being 30–40% more efficient than with traditional cooling system building by building. So there is really value in having a holistic approach, and those technologies are mature. So for us, the challenge is really to find the business models, the partnerships that will allow us to deploy those solutions that are already very relevant today at scale. This is really the essence of the work we're doing today. We're partnering with real estate developer. You might have heard of the deal we struck with Logos a few months ago.
Yeah.
It's very simple. Now, Logos is a warehouse developer. It has millions of unused rooftop space, square meter across Asia Pacific, and we simply plan to carpet everything with decentralized rooftop solar. And aggregated, we think we can reach 400 megawatts in a few years, 400 megawatts of solar that wouldn't have been valorized otherwise. So it just gives you the idea of the potential of finding the right partnership approach between industry players, and that will really make the needle move. That's what we are fighting for.
No, absolutely. And you know, I think from this panel, we've had such interesting inputs coming from the strong ambition that countries and cities are showing to the finance sector, moving to the private sector now, looking at innovative solutions of how to really move the needle, because I guess that's what we are all here all about, because as we heard, it's not just the direction that the transition is going in, that we of course realize that it's going in the right direction, but it's the pace, the speed at which we need the transition to happen. So I guess we need innovative solutions, and we need strong policy backing from countries and the leadership, which can then make the finance move, which can get the private sector engaged in partnerships and collaboration. So thank you so much, all of you, for being part of this very interesting discussion. And we'll all be watching how the needle moves. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, panelists. Ms. Gauri Singh, thank you very much for moderating this very lively session as well. Thank you.